So today is a day that unfortunately Alabama fans everywhere are waking up to a wide range of emotions because yes, while there is good news on the recruiting front that we've got to talk about, there's also bad news in the injury department as it's being reported that sophomore wide receiver Jalen Hale suffered an injury in yesterday's practice and today we've got to talk about it. But before we can, as always, y'all know the drill. I have got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments and let me know if Jalen Hale is sidelined for any extended period of time. Who do you believe steps up and takes reps at that outside wide receiver position? I can't wait to hear from you. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed the content, be sure to like and comment down below. As those interactions seem small, but they truly are massive to content creators such as myself in both getting picked up and maintained by the YouTube algorithm. But having said all that, let's dive right into it. And unfortunately, we're going to start off with the injury news first, that Jalen Hale suffered a leg injury. And though I don't know the severity, all I know is that it's being widely reported. And he will remain in our thoughts and prayers. Hopefully this is something that he will be back on the road to recovery, back healthy sooner rather than later. Because I've made it no secret, I was really excited for Jalen Hale's sophomore campaign. And the why to that is simple, because he has got a ton of ability, and he's a guy that last season, though he didn't get the most opportunity, anytime he got opportunity, he created value for himself. He had 5 receptions, 148 yards, and averaged 29.6 per. I thought he was in for a monstrous sophomore campaign, and hopefully his road to recovery will lead him to being back better than ever soon. But in the meantime, we have got to ask the question, where does Alabama turn? And luckily, as Jake Merrill over on Bama Football on YouTube with Kyle Henderson and myself have been discussing over the previous few days, we feel like Alabama's wide receiver room is a really underrated aspect of this team that a lot of people really aren't talking about. And I get it. Over the past few seasons, Alabama has not had the production in that room that so many Tide fans have become expecting out of the wide receivers, because Alabama had a historic run of wide receivers, not only in terms of production, but then in terms of development and sending them to the NFL. But fear not, Alabama fans. I think this wide receiver room has got a ton of talent, and today we've got to discuss who could be taking reps at that outside wide receiver position, especially with the scrimmage right in front of us. And the first name I'm going to talk about is Jeremy Bernard, and the reason is simple, because he understands this offense. He understands what Coach Shepard wants from him. And we talk about this all the time with some of the other senior players. In fact, one of the guys on this team that I am so excited is back is none other than Malachi Moore in the defensive back room. And the why is quite simple. 1, he's extremely talented. But 2, that defensive back room is really young. You have got a veteran presence in Malachi Moore that has got an extremely high football IQ that helps as a coach on the field that can help those guys get acclimated because he knows the standard. Well, so too does Jeremy Bernard. Jeremy Bernard was a part of that Washington wide receiving core, and he is a guy that the Washington Husky faithful thought would be wide receiver 1 for them this year. He has got that much ability. The only reason why he didn't get more production is because that wide receiver room up in Washington went crazy this past year. Several guys got real active, and Jeremy Bernard was a part of that. But now he's over with the Crimson Tide. And because he knows the offense, because he knows what Shepard wants, he is going to be an incredible, valuable asset, not only in terms of this offense, but in terms of helping these other guys get acclimated, because they can watch someone, one of their own, go out there and he knows what to do. But he also has a similar size and stature to Jalen Hale, which makes him an interesting fit for that outside wide receiver position. And he is someone who is going to get active once he gets the ball in his hands. He is an explosive wide receiver who can take it to the house at any given opportunity. So I wouldn't be shocked in the slightest to see him slide out there and get some opportunities. But luckily for Alabama, you've got a wide receiver room with a ton of versatility. And you have got wide receivers with stylistic differences, but you also have got wide receivers that are able to play multiple different positions. And the reason why I always turn your attention to that versatility, it allows you to min-max your roster. And what I mean is you can get the best collection of talent out there if you have guys that you can put at multiple different positions. And luckily, Alabama has that in a big way in the wide receiver room. You're looking at guys like Kendrick Law that could play multiple different positions. You're looking at a guy like an Emmanuel Henderson. Could he be well on his way to playing multiple different positions in the wide receiver room? He was just a guy that Coach Shepard was laying praise at his feet, saying Emmanuel Henderson has done everything he's asked, and he's been everything he hoped. We know Emmanuel Henderson is uber talented, came to Alabama as a running back. He is a longer type wide receiver, standing 6'1", similar stature to Jalen Hale. Could he be someone that's now inserted into the wide receiver lineup to allow for some of that versatility to really start taking place? And then there's Kobe Prentice. You have plenty of options in this Alabama wide receiver room for guys being able to shift around and make plays. But the one thing that is a little bit of a positive here is that with the scrimmage coming up tomorrow, that allows for these guys to get some reps in a quote-unquote game setting that will help them get acclimated to that position. Another name we need to be on the lookout for is none other than Jaron Hamilton, a sophomore wide receiver who stands 6'1", 200 pounds, and someone who's been making plays in the background. Could he take this as an opportunity to get more reps and really create value for himself with those reps? You can see how Nick Saban has permeated into my vocabulary. But last and certainly not least, could a true freshman step up in a big way? Because for that outside wide receiver position, Jalen Hale had some size, but you want to talk about someone on this Alabama roster who has a ton of height. That's Caleb Odom, who came to Alabama as a tight end, the number one tight end in the nation in last year's recruiting class, and has since transitioned to wide receiver. And yes, this is a transition that I'm very excited to see, but he is an instant mismatch on the outside, standing 6'5", 215 pounds, and all the athleticism that you could want. Whenever you watch Odom, he's not just winning his routes off of physicality at the high school level. And that's hyper impressive to see, because if you're 6'5", 215 pounds, a lot of the times you can just straight up win off of physicality, but he's winning off of finesse. He's winning off of route running. He's winning off of gaining separation at different stages of the route running process, and that's something you love to see. It's why I think he's transitioning to wide receiver, because he has so many wide receiver tendencies. But his size is something that could be an instant mismatch because of something we just talked about. The different versatility you have in this Alabama wide receiver room really allows you to min-max what you're able to do. And let's not forget, Alabama has a superstar talent on the way that will be there this summer in Ryan Williams, who will be pushing for playing time. I know he should be going into his senior year, but this guy has got a different level of ability that's going to be really hard to keep off the field. And really, this is the point I've been trying to make. Alabama has got a lot of talent in this wide receiver room, and somebody's going to step up, but there are a lot of options. But it is still incredibly unfortunate that Jalen Hale goes down with this injury, and he will certainly be in all of our thoughts and prayers, and hopefully on his way to a healthy road to recovery, and he'll be back sooner than later, better than ever. But now, we need to transition and talk about some positive news on the recruiting front, and we're going to talk about two subjects today. First and foremost, David Sanders from this past weekend loved his visit, and I think that's massive. I've made it no secret over on Bama Football on YouTube with Kyle Henderson that I've been receiving texts from outside people who don't even cover Alabama saying, hey, Alabama's really starting to chip away at several prominent offensive linemen. And this is before this past weekend's visit where they made up a ton of ground with David Sanders. Alabama is going to be chipping away at several top offensive linemen, and it's going to be pertinent that they land some big ones because Alabama's offensive line has not been where they wanted it, though I do believe the talent is there. Hopefully, Coach Cap can come in, get them right this year, and continue recruiting at a high level, but Alabama fans everywhere are wanting to see some big wins in the trenches because that's how football games are won and lost. More good news on the recruiting front. How about five-star quarterback Juju Lewis returning to Tuscaloosa after he was just here not too long ago for another visit? And if you're an Alabama fan, this is an incredibly positive development. Why? Because this is the quarterback this staff has been chipping away at and chipping away at. He's currently committed to USC. USC just went on a crazy recruiting run this past weekend, but it's Alabama. And we know what Alabama does in terms of development, and we know what Kalen DeBoer and these guys do in terms of quarterback development. Remember, there are several prominent names on this staff that have done great jobs with quarterbacks. Kalen DeBoer, Nick Sheridan, and Brian Ellis, the tight end coach. And the reason why I always point you to Brian Ellis is because Brian Ellis was with Western Kentucky whenever Bailey Zapp was there, and he was an offensive play caller there. He was working with the quarterbacks. Bailey Zapp broke records under Brian Ellis. So Alabama has got several different people on this roster that are great with quarterbacks, more than they had a year ago, more than they had 2 years ago, and that's an incredibly positive development. If you are Juju Lewis, you can now look at this staff and say, hey, Nick Saban was the GOAT, but now there's an offensive staff in place. Now the head guy is someone who has worked with quarterbacks. The offensive coordinator has worked with quarterbacks. There are several people in the building that can work with quarterbacks, and they have an incredibly successful track record. That moves the needle. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Juju Lewis, but it also helps that Caleb Odom and he have familiarity. This is something we're going to be watching closely because this is a guy that Alabama fans everywhere would love to get in this recruiting class. And if he is to jump in this recruiting class, watch out. That's going to be a major momentum shift in Alabama's favor. And I would imagine would cause an avalanche of commits thereafter, something that we're going to keep up with. But you already know. I have to hear from you. Let me know what you're thinking on the Jalen Hale front. Let me know what you're thinking on the recruiting front, and I'll see you here soon. That's it. See ya.